I'm NJ, Cody Ironworks. This is the fourth one in a series called Forging for the Apocalypse. In the last three videos of this little live stream series, we've been talking about building a forge, building a blower, building the basic tools and what you would need to have for that if you were bushcraft blacksmithing or something were to happen and um, you needed to build some stuff and you didn't have any other way to procure it other than to build it. Um, but also, it shows you that you don't need to go buy a bunch of stuff, expensive stuff, in order to do this. Now, I do have a real anvil here because I'm old and my back hurts, and I could easily drag one of the bush anvils over. But if you're interested in that stuff, you can go over and check out the bush anvils. If you were going to use a bush anvil, I would recommend you get it up to the same height as your anvil, and I don't have the means to do that in the shop. But I also have electricity. So we did build a blower, and it was a functioning blower last week when we did this. But I have the ability to use some power. And so this is just a fan blower. Some people call them a squirrel cage blower out of, well, they use them in all kinds of applications. I think this one probably came out of a industrial vent fan from a bathroom. And so anywhere there's a bathroom fart fan, you can absolutely procure yourself a blower for that. So let's talk about fuels. The first thing, of course, we've got to have something. We've got to have something to run our forge on. All over the world, and right up until the industrial age, everybody used charcoal. Charcoal is a fine fuel for a forge. It gets plenty hot to forge weld, gets plenty hot to do all that stuff. In fact, in most places in the world, they still use charcoal. I get raw lump charcoal. I have in the past made my own charcoal, and at some point, maybe in the future, we will do a video about making your own charcoal and how to do it. It's fairly easy if you have a wood source that you can use to make the charcoal with. Your other choice is coal. There's two kinds of coal. I'm in Wyoming, and we have bituminous coal, and they consider it a soft coal. And the bad part about bituminous coal is most of it will not coke. It doesn't coke up good enough to get hot enough in a forge to actually get up to forging temperatures. It just doesn't get hot enough. So your other choice is anthracite coal, which comes from Pennsylvania and West Virginia, a lot of East Coast places. It's a harder coal. I do have a little of it here. It's a little buried. And I have seen some guys have some success with certain veins of Western coal that's kind of in between. But because I'm shipping all of the fuel in, I go with coke. So this is coke. I get it in 40 or 50 pound bags. It comes from Georgia. So everybody goes, well, what is coke? Well, coke is to coal what charcoal is to wood. So what they do is they cook all of the gases out of the coal. Think of coal oil, right? They burn all of that stuff off, and it turns into a very dense fuel. So here's the charcoal, here's the coke, and the thing about coke is that I like is it doesn't smoke. So when I'm doing demonstrations all over the place, you don't get that fuely coal smell. Some people are real reminiscent of it; they really like it. But when you're in downtown Cody and you're belching out big plumes of coal smoke, a lot of the restaurants and the people eating at the restaurants don't really appreciate it. So the coke, it burns much cleaner. It burns hotter than most coal, and it's relatively safe because if you don't have oxygen go into this coke, it will go out in a matter of minutes, dead out. So in some applications, that's really great, and in other applications, it's not. If you're trying to run this forge all day long and just let it roll all along, you almost have to add charcoal. So I tend to use both fuels. I use charcoal and I use coke when I'm running one of these forges, and that way I can pull most of the coke out when I'm not using it, throw a couple of pieces of charcoal in there. It'll stay burning, and I can rake the coke back over the charcoal, and it'll catch back on again. It'll start up again, okay? But you don't need it. But if you're shipping it in, by the pound, you're well better to use coke than coal if you're having to ship it in like by the bag, because you're going to lose between 40 and 60% of the gross weight of your coal getting it to coke in your forge. So if you're shipping it in and you're paying by the pound, you're better off to go with coke. All right, so I'm going to show you. Now, you can't start, it's pretty hard to start the forge with just coke. Because of how high the temperature is, that it is required to catch this fuel on fire to get it started. You can't just use, unless you have a really good torch, you might be able to start it. So I use the charcoal to start the forge, and then I'll rake in some coke. And we're going to try to build something tonight. We'll see how far we get along with this deal. So here's our, I don't know if we're going to be able to use those tongs or not. We'll see. So we're going to try a couple of different things. We might try to make a knife or two, forge up a knife. So I've got a piece of 5160 coil spring here, which is one of my favorite things to make tools, chisels, punches, and stuff out of. They make a fairly good knife. My favorite thing to make a knife out of is a piece of rasp. This is a piece of rasp that I've just pre-cut, so I don't have so much work, so we can get along with some forging here, and I can show you what's going on. I can show you how the forge gets hot. If you missed the live stream on building this forge, you'll have to go back and watch that. I won't feel bad if you fast forward through it and just kind of skip through it. It was a little wordy and a little long. It took us about an hour and a half to build that forge up from start to finish in that last live stream. And that's Forging for the Apocalypse number 3, I think. So I'm going to break some of this. I'm going to break some of this charcoal up into some smaller pieces. This lump charcoal that you get at Walmart or wherever you buy your barbecuing equipment at. And I find that the hardwood charcoal works best. You don't really want pieces much bigger than your thumb. So we're just going to crack these up a little bit, break them up. Start a few in here, throw them in there. Now, of course, you need some paper or something to start this with. The easiest way is just like you would start your barbecue. Wad up some paper and get it up underneath that charcoal. Maybe use a few little pieces of kindling or something. But for the sake of speed here, I'm going to get a torch, and we're going to just start it with a torch. I use the heck out of this little torch. It's made by that company that makes stoves, like camp stoves from Japan. Snow, I think is what it's called, something like that. It's a very useful torch, or a very useful torch I use. So we're going to plug this in. Now I have a little flap. Now I have a little flap here, and I can dampen the forge using this little flap that slides over the intake on this, but I'm going to leave her wide open. And this forge blower, it takes a little bit to build up some steam. It gets up to speed, it takes a little time. So while that's doing that, I'm going to crack up a little more. Crack up a couple of more pieces of charcoal. Stack it in there. Like I said, nothing much bigger than your finger. Put a couple more pieces in there. This is not the job for people who like to be clean. Blacksmithing is a dirty business. All right, so we've got a pretty good bit of charcoal in there, and you could just stack that up. Hence the reason for this board is you could pre-load a bunch of busted up charcoal and stack it against this fence, and then you can just rake it into the forge hat as you need it. I wish you guys could experience the smell. It's very distinctive, and it's definitely part of the things that makes you think about a blacksmith. Okay, so we're going to start with here's our tongs that we made. We call them bush tongs. I've annealed this piece of rasp, and I think I might be a little long there, but we'll cut it off as we go. I kind of did that on purpose. This is going to be a tanged knife. Here's our bush tongs that we made out of a couple of pieces of steel in one of the previous, I think the first episode of this that we did. Now, those tongs probably aren't going to hold this. Well, maybe. They might hold this all right. Oh yeah, I might be able to get away with that. I mean, ideally what you'd do is you'd make a real set of tongs the very first thing when you got along with this. Now, this is one of those things that you cannot walk away from this piece of steel. If you walk away from this piece of steel and go to the bathroom and come back, your steel will be gone. Because that fuel gets so hot that it will turn that steel into a liquid, and then it'll turn it into a gas, and you'll come out and it'll be a sparkler. That's how hot this charcoal gets. I always recommend for blacksmiths at first to don't start with coal or charcoal. Start with liquid fuel, natural gas, or propane fired forge, because it's much easier to control your heat and control your fire. You might turn that. Now I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I cut that air down. I just about put it in half by closing that damper up. And I know we're dark here. I did this on purpose. I wanted you to see how the flame built up on this. I wanted you to kind of watch this, how this flame builds up. So this is more about learning how to manage your forge and your fire than it is about the bush part of this deal. So, but just that steel is hot. I might shut off this ring light just so you can see it better. So in an open top forge like this, you can get stuff hot fast. I'm going to grab a magnet. This anvil rings really badly. Let's see if I can do that before I burn up my steel. This little anvil really rings bad, so we'll put a magnet on it, and that will keep that from ringing so badly. All right, so So our homemade those tongs are working fine. Wouldn't take much to adjust them if you had to adjust them. We got plenty of heat there. I don't know that we're far enough along the path that we can straighten that out much. This 5160 is some hard stuff to forge. Even when it gets up to forging temperature, it's really hard. So you very well might have to build a couple of sets of tongs. It wouldn't take much to punch a hole in these and make them into a real tong if you needed to. But I just wanted to show everybody that you could make up some tools that are totally usable in a matter of minutes. I think it took me about 5 minutes on that first live stream to build these. I find a rasp to be they're fairly close to what you want for a blade thickness in a knife, especially a bush knife. And so it just requires much less forging. So the closer you can get your steel into the shape that you want, the lot less forging you have to do. Other good options are lawnmower blades, work really good. They're a fairly good steel. They're thinner, so they make a thinner knife. I've got way more material here than I need. But we got to get it straight before we can do anything. So on the ends of these springs, one side is on the end of the spring. This is the coil spring out of the front of a car or a pickup with independent front suspension on it. So one side is flat, you can see, and one side is round. So that saves you a lot of forging if you use the end of the spring. You don't have nearly as much forging to do. Now, we got plenty of heat there. I'm actually going to turn it down even more. You want to rake that coals back over the top of that to keep as much of that heat in. You want the coke that's cold to work as an insulation over the top of your fire, so it helps keep the heat in, right? If you just let it burn out the top, you lose all the heat out of the forge and you don't get the temperatures that are as good for forging. Now, if you want a bigger fire, add more fuel, add more air. Everything will build up. Of course, we want to try to be as efficient as we can. The key to this is efficiency. I'm going to go turn a fan on and just to blow the carbon monoxide out of here a little bit. This is one of those things that you definitely want to do as near to outside as you can, because you can kill yourself deader than Hogan's goat with this. They do produce a ridiculous amount of carbon monoxide, so if you're trying to do this in your garage, you're going to kill yourself. If you guys have ever been around blacksmith shops, the reason that a blacksmith shop, most of them don't have any windows in them, is because you want to work in the dark as much as you can, or in low light so you can see the color of your steel. That's how you know if it's forging temperature or not. If you're working right out in the broad daylight, it's much, much harder to do this. It adds a whole nother level of complexity. You can just feel and see how much harder that steel is to work underneath the hammer. That's about the ideal fire there now. Of course, if you were doing wagon rims or you were doing something big, you build a bigger fire. Get your hot spot bigger. With an open top forge like this, it's pretty easy to do that. You just crank up the blower. Now that we got that coke going, if you were making a chisel, this would almost be the ideal shape already. For doing the chisel. It takes a little bit for the heat to soak into the middle of a big piece of steel, and so I kind of forge slow in the beginning, and especially on a thicker piece like that, because of course it's going to heat from the outside in, and so you don't want to just go trying to wail on it the first heat or two. You want that heat to soak into that material and get into the inside of it. getting there on that blade shape. I don't want any curve on it. We'll take that out. You'll find that as you work this steel, especially when you narrow up that edge, it wants to banana up because you're stretching that material. And so it wants to curl up, so you don't want it to go too far before you straighten it back out, or else it's twice as hard to get it out. Fiddling with our tongs. When I'm doing that point, I lay the hammer over the edge of the anvil. And then I can get right down there on the point. But you can see that we are consuming fuel. We're having to add. Now, if you had to walk away from this for a minute, because that's mostly coke, you'd roll that back, roll the top of that back, throw some charcoal in there. Should be able to get this blade just about 90% forged in. Okay, so we're about halfway through our blade, so what we'll do is, now that that fire is built up a little bit, it's not down in the hole of the forge, I can slide that across there. So, some of this coke is a little big, like that piece is pretty big. A lot of times they won't burn down, so you just break them up. You might try to do some kind of a green river knife here, like more of a skinning type knife out of this. So I'm going to have to heat up more of the back of the blade. You didn't see a lot of full-tang knives 200 years ago because the steel was expensive, but steel is everywhere now. Hardenable steel is everywhere. My tongs are failing me. I might have to go get another set. Just adjusted them. Now, because this forge doesn't have a clinker breaker in it, which is a little nut that's down in the tweer that you roll around and it knocks the clinker out. The clinker is a piece of the stuff that won't burn up that gets down in the tweer and it plugs off the tweer. So you get 2 hours of forging on this. A lot of times 2 or 3 hours, 2 hours generally probably. You'll have to let the forge die, clean it out, knock all the clinker out of the grate, and then roll everything back. So you can see as I forge that down how that starts to look like a banana. As you can see, we're coming up with a fairly good knife there. Now, I'm not going to get too carried away here because that Coke now is costing me probably 40 bucks a bag. So for free videos on YouTube, we're going to take it a little easy. I'm looking for about 3/16 thickness. Now when I go to taper that tang, I'm going to taper it both ways. I'm going to taper it from the sides and I'm going to taper it from the ends so it's narrower this way and it's narrower this way. And that way when you go to cram a handle on there, it goes on easier. Developing hammer control is a really important part of this because you don't want to have to go fix your screw-ups if you're hitting wrong. So that's one of those things where I know I make it look fairly easy, but you have to remember I've been doing this 35 years. It's not as easy as you think. You're manipulating a set of tongs, something in the tongs, and a hammer, and you're striking against something, and you're trying to hit the same place. It's like moving a moving target. It's like playing tennis on a boat in the middle of the ocean with 6-foot swells. Everything's moving around underneath you, so you have to develop your hammer control. And now I'm going to work on that tang. Yeah. It's called a half-faced blow. I'm hitting half on the anvil and half off. Developing my edge profile here a little bit. I'm going to narrow up my overlapping blows. Who knows, maybe I'll give these knives away in the giveaway. Let's see. You can see that I got a big swell in this. You have to develop your eye. So see how I got a belly in it? Not so much that way, but I've got a belly in it this way. Well, when you go to push that handle on there, it ain't going to want to go. And we want that handle to be at least that long, wider than our hand, right? We want it to be at least that long. I'm using a flat face on my hammer. We talked about rounding hammers. So I'm fairly happy with that. One more heat on that and we'll call it good. You don't want your tang much wider than your handle or your blade. Ideally, you move the work under the hammer as much as you can. It's harder to do when you're doing this kind of work. But if you go to a school, back in the day, okay, I'm fairly happy with that. So now we're going to do a full tang knife here. I got to do the handle now. See, if you work on two pieces, that gives you the opportunity to utilize your fuel. While one piece is heating, the other piece is getting worked. But you have to know how to manage your fuel so you're not burning up your piece in between. And I have done it many times. So you can see that I've got about 90%. Thank you for the like. I appreciate that very much. I'm almost 90% of a blade here. When I get done with this, all we'll have to do is take a rasp the edge in pretty good, and then quench it off, temper it somehow, and then cram a handle on it. The handle on these knives is the easy part. I do a lot of what I call cram handle knives. A ton of them. Now see, that's not hot enough to forge. We're looking for a bright orange. See, we're about there. We don't ever measure anything. Get the back of this blade hot. The hot spot that we're working with in there, the real forging, is only about that big where the fuel gets hot enough. So you're trying to get both those pieces of steel into that sweet spot in that forge. Thank you for the likes. I really appreciate it. There, now we're talking. So I'm going to do what they call fullering now. I'm going to come over here to the horn of the handle. I'm going to switch and use the round side. See, we're making some progress. When that steel gets hot, it moves fairly well. Now, if I had some water, I would run some water over the top of that and quench those top coals off. It doesn't need to be hot up that high. I'm going to sprinkle a little water over that. Not too much, just a little. Don't burn yourself. Steam burn yourself. Very easy to do. I know that my handle face is just about the width of what I need a blade to be, or what I need a handle to be. And of course, a handle on a knife like this, it don't matter. We're doing a bush knife. We're not building something that's going to go in the blade magazine. Hey, we're about there on this one. Now that's plenty of tang. Now we're not going to be bambooing with this knife. We're not going to be, we need something that we can cut meat off of stuff with and, you know, do some basic kind of work with. This is not meant to be a knife that's going to win you Forged in Fire contest. We're going to kind of just work the blade just a little more, but you can see that I have my, it isn't going to take much to get my blade profile right on that. And I'm going to take it, with these kind of knives, I'm going to take it right down as close as I can get it. Okay, we got way too much material here, so I'm going to cut some of this off. We're going to set up the anvil. Do that. So, this is called the hold down tool. And you can see I just made it out of some mild steel stock, just stacked it up and forge welded it together. Some people call them a dog. They go in there like that. I might have to get a glove because, yeah, I'm definitely going to have to get a glove. My chisel is short, and my steel is hot. I'm going to use a chisel that I made. So now we're just trying to straighten, kind of do final little thing there. Some of that tip is going to come off. We're going to grind it off, but we're looking for fairly straight. We're looking for fairly straight. And we've got it fairly straight. We're going to have to heat this back up again, and we can fiddle with it then. So the good thing about this rasp steel is now that it's been hot all the way through, it doesn't take much to get it to where we'll be able to work it. Okay, so we're going to have to cut a piece of this handle off on this other one. So I'm going to try to do this. And I don't know if this is going to work or not without killing myself. But we're going to try it. Because, like I said, this is bush. This is serious bush crap here. And if you don't think I can't feel that heat, that blade through that wood. Now, you got to be careful because you don't want to drive that chisel into your anvil face. This is kind of a double chisel that I made. It's not really it's more of a cold chisel than a hot chisel, but you use it for everything. Okay, so then to undo this, we just pop that like that, take that off, spin this around, get a hold of this, nice and hard, and then we should be able to break that off. Now we'll do the rest of this handle on this one with the fuel that we have left. You notice I'm always adjusting my temperature. And I don't want to give you guys the impression that this is easy. This takes some practice. I mean, I've been doing this for I'm sure longer than most of you guys have been alive. So there's our, and I'm going to take, like I said, some of this is going to leave. I'm going to probably take some of that off in the rasping process, but we got to let it anneal. We got to let it naturalize. Naturalize is the word I'm looking for. And you want to be careful where you set that, because if you set it out in a draft, the wind will almost harden it back up sometimes. You'll know if you screw it up because you'll go to straighten it when it's cold, and it'll go ping, and it'll break it. Well, I'm not going to get too far along here. We're an hour into this deal. That's probably more than I can make anybody watch this. Questions, comments? If you guys have any questions when you watch this, leave it in the comments. I watched this pretty close so far. You know, the bad thing about Forged in Fire is they make this look like they do it in 20 minutes or 25 minutes, and that's not the way this goes. You know, it's 2 days to make a knife, because I let that steel naturalize out. Sometimes, depending on the piece of steel I'm using, I'll let it naturalize twice. So I'll heat it back up, and then I'll let it cool down for another 8 hours, and I'll just let it. And that way, that takes all the stress from me hammering that out of that steel. So, I mean, you can make something I can make something in 30 minutes that will cut and works good, but if you're really making something nice, right, it takes a longer time. All right. Now this steel is a different animal. It isn't like the W1 or whatever that is they use in those files. You have to truly anneal this, or else you'll never get anywhere with it. You won't even be able to drill it. So I'm going to bring it up, make sure that it's good and hot all the way through, and we'll shut the forge off, and I'll just kind of rake the coals back over the top of it, and that'll hopefully keep some of the heat in. It's not as effective as ash. Wood ash works the best. If you had a bunch of wood ash, you'd take it and then you bury it in the wood ash, and the wood ash works like insulation, and it allows that steel to cool down very slowly, and it softens the steel up so you can drill it, file it a lot easier, do all of that stuff. All right. Thus endeth our lesson on forging for the apocalypse, or building your own forge and getting your own stuff going without a bunch of money and extra. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Find me on, I'm on Instagram. I'm not on there a ton. Facebook, TikTok, I'm on there a lot, and then here. Oh, Reddit. I have a very active Reddit page too. So get a hot and hit it. Always wear your safety squints if you like the content. Slip over to the Cody Ironworks Etsy store and share some love. We'll unplug this forge up. Unplug the blower. Like that. Cover that up for a few minutes. It won't take long for this forge to cool down. By the time I go to bed, we'll be ready. Get it hot and hit it. Always wear your safety squints. If you like the content, slip over to the Cody Ironworks Etsy store and share some love. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening, and next time we'll work on maybe making some fuel or making a different kind of a forge.